Welcome to the fifth in a series of online mock divorce mediation programs. Today's role play will deal with an issue that has particular relevance to same-sex couples. The mediator will be Anju Jasani, and the couple will be Elise Holman and Gina Munoz. Elise has now called New York City her home for 20 years. She relocated from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to attend a musical theater conservatory. Most of her career has been in the hospitality industry, where she enjoys bringing people together and creating memorable experiences for them. Gina's had a solo practice for more than 17 years, focusing on the purchase and sale of real property in New York City and the Hamptons and upstate New York. She's the Senior Director of Provider Information at the CMO, the care management company of Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx. She also serves as the chair of the board of the Trevor Project, the leading national organization to prevent suicide and provide crisis intervention to the LGBTQ youth. Questions will be taken at the conclusion of the mediation. You can raise your hand at the conclusion or enter your question in the Q&A function during the mediation. So with that, Anju, it's now yours.
And Gina and Elise also going to unmute. Thank you. So it's so great that you are back today. How was your weekend?
Good.
It was nice.
Great. Okay. So, I usually start with an agenda. So let's take a look at the agenda. And it is always what you want to talk about in this session. But I've got a couple of bullet points, and let's go through what I perceived we were going to go talk about today. And you can tell me what you actually want to talk about. So give me a second. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to check in and see what's new or changed since May 1st. And see if you had any questions from our last session, and then just go through the summary of facts from the last session that you gave me. I want to make sure that I have it right. I also want to understand your goals for today's session and your goals for your divorce, which may be different. Review where you agree and review the outstanding issues that you have not completely agreed upon yet. And then schedule the next session and talk about homework. So, with that, let me ask you, was there anything else you wanted to add to today's agenda that you want to talk about?
I don't think so from my end. I think we'll probably cover some of the items.
Great.
Okay. Good. So first of all, let me ask you, has anything changed since last time? Have you made any offline agreements? Has anyone moved? Have you, I know your house is up for sale. Has anything happened with the house?
We did have some good offers come in, so I think we're both comfortable with the house, that it's going to be an equitable split that we can both agree on. Elise, if I'm misspeaking, please.
Nope. Yep. The house. We agree on the house. Yep. That's true.
Okay. And so it looks like you might have an offer fairly in the short term.
Yes.
And what would be the closing time for the house if you got the offer? Let's just say by the end of the month.
If we got the offer by the end of the month, we've probably got about a 30-day close from there.
Okay. Okay. So that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And in terms of that, when that happens, do you have a plan on in terms of where you're moving to next?
I have, this was a point of contention with us, but I've a place I'm staying with a mutual friend of ours until I can get settled and kind of figure out the next step for me. I think it definitely depends on the rest of our agreements with our equity and things like that. So for now, I'm just having a meanwhile space in the meantime kind of situation.
All right. And Gina, what about you?
I do have a place that I can rent, that I can stay at. So I think, I'm pretty settled. So I think I'm going to, I think I've got a place. I just have to finish the paperwork, and I want to make sure the house sells and that everything's in line before I commit to renting something.
All right. Okay. And we were looking at your listed price of $700,000. Is that what the realtors are saying you should be getting for your home?
Yes. Yeah. And it was the one that we really liked was an all cash offer, and that's why it would be a quick close. And that's kind of what we're looking for, to just sort of move faster and be done with it.
Okay, sounds like it's a very good market in Maplewood.
Yeah.
All right. So what about any questions from our last session?
Nothing comes to mind in particular.
Yeah, I think we're just both looking to get this, resolved. I think we agree that we want to be amicable, we want to be friendly. We definitely, we have a history, but I think it's just starting the constant conversation about every little thing that comes up is starting to be a drain. And we just want to do the right thing by each other, even though we might not agree.
Now, that's really not unusual. It's often something that people have tried to not talk about. And now you have the pressure to make some decisions that it's a difficult time.
Yeah.
So let me just summarize the facts that you told me last time in our free consultation. And we also signed the agreement to mediate then. So Gina, you're 48 and Elise is 37. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And I understand that you got married in 2013, right when you were legally allowed to get married in New Jersey. In fact, you told me you got married the first day that it became available on October 21st, 2013. But that you had a commitment ceremony on January 1st, 2008, the same time that you bought your home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And also that one of the reasons you waited and didn't do a civil union is because you both said that you were proponents of marriage equality and you wanted marriage. You didn't want something in between.
Right. I think we both saw it as less than, and that's not what
Yep.
we want.
Okay.
It's very important to both of us. Yeah.
All right. So that was the reason that you waited, because when marriage became available, that's what you wanted, nothing less than that. Okay. And Gina, you make $200,000 in total compensation as a research scientist with Johnson & Johnson.
Yes.
Okay. And Elise, you freelance as a technical writer,
Mhm.
and you make about $75,000 a year.
Yes, that's right.
And so you have the house that you live in Maplewood. I also understand that you have a dog you want to talk about in terms of sharing custody, but I think that we're leaving for another session. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about it. I think it was probably something that I didn't fully think through. It's sort of, it's kind of like a child. So you don't automatically think about splitting a child between two people who aren't going to be together. So it's something that we definitely would like to talk about a bit more.
Right. And that's definitely something that a lot of people who get divorced want to do in terms of sharing the time. And your dog's name is?
Roscoe.
Roscoe? Okay. Want to make sure that I get that right. Okay. And we'll always look at what's best for Roscoe and what works for both of you. So maybe you can tell me first what your goals are for today's session. What would you like to accomplish today?
Well, for me, as Gina was saying earlier, we have been together for a very long time, and we do want to come out of this being friendly at least, or, we're very involved with each other's families and each other's friends. So I'm just personally tired of the back and forth kind of bickering of it all. I would rather just keep it moving. Let's make these choices. And, especially about I want to be able to move on with my life. And until it's figured out how we're going to be splitting the money that I thought we were since we were equal partners, that was kind of the whole point of our relationship, was all about equality. Until that's figured out, I think that I'm kind of in definitely a rougher place than Gina is. So that is important to me to really come to an agreement about how we're going to split our assets.
Yeah, I think, and surprise, but we agree on this one. I do think that the financial piece is really starting to wear us both down, probably. And, we have a different idea of what it means in terms of how long we've been together. So, I think as with most couples, if we're looking at equality, people start dating, you date for a while, then if you decide you're going to be together, you get married, and that's kind of the pivotal point of when your life changes. And even though I realize it's a certificate and a piece of paper that gets filed, but all the couples before us and after us, regardless of their sexuality, are not going to be arguing that they started dating, and as of day one, everything was shared. So we need to get past that feeling that I'm not putting any thought into our relationship being serious before we got married, because that's obviously not the case. It's really, I understand where she's coming from because I know her, but I also think there's a point where there's some, it's just, a little, maybe common sense, just a little rational about really what happened in both of our lives and our careers as we grew together until we hit the point where we were married.
So the challenge you're both facing is trying to figure out really kind of the length of time that you both want to share the assets that you've acquired together. And
Yes.
there is a disagreement on that we'll talk about, but I also am hearing that you're tired of the back and forth. You want to reach an agreement. It's beginning to wear on you and wear on both of you, right? And it's, creating, it's the thing you're thinking about when you go to sleep at night, the thing you're thinking about when you wake up in the morning, and it's not allowing you to enjoy the beautiful weather, the time, COVID ending, and so forth. I did want to ask you if you had to, talk about what your goals are for your divorce, bigger picture, 2 years or 5 years later, you want to talk about, we were able to do it this way, or we accomplished this. What's important to you in that picture 5 years from now when you look back about what you want to say about your divorce?
I really want it to be a positive thing. I mean, we made this decision to better our relationships with ourselves. We never imagined it to be this way. It was not something we expected to be fighting over such petty stuff. So I know that Gina's family is very important to me, and I would not want to lose that. So I would like to be able to look back in 5 years and say, hey, I still see, I'm not going to see them as much, but, we've grown very, very close. So to me, I would like to have something that we can look back and say, we did it the right way. We weren't mean to each other. And we, just did, I want it to be happy as something like this can be, I suppose.
And Gina, what would you say in terms of what you'd like to look back and say about your divorce?
I mean, I think I agree that I would like for it to have while it's sad, it ended well and everything was fine. I think my biggest, I don't want to look back and feel resentful of the relationship because of the divorce. So I would really just like to look back and say, we were civil, we did the right thing by each other. And if we can exist in the same social circles, that's great. And if we can't, we don't feel negative about it. Because if we just strip this all back down to, day one, I mean, there is a reason why I was drawn to Elise, right? She is a good person and we did, build a life together. So I don't want that to be negative.
All right. So the idea is that you want it to be civil, right? That's the common goal that you both have. You don't want this to turn into a war of the roses, and you want to be able to move forward.
Yeah.
I think I heard a little bit different with Elise in terms of a desire to, maintain good relations with your family and keep it amicable. I heard that, your goal is to make sure it doesn't get negative, but there's, the common goal is to get it done and to be able to move forward. And both of you to feel like you got a fair deal out of this, right? That what you did was fair. Both of you have said you're not interested in in getting a judge to make these decisions or going to trial, right? That's not what you stand for.
No,
Both of you have attorneys, right? And they've both been advising you. And so what I'd like to understand is what are the areas of agreement? Because people often focus on the areas of disagreement first, but if we can understand where you agree, then we can put those on the side and focus the time to try and reconcile where you don't agree. But we might be surprised at how much you agree upon too. So, I know that I can go through a list, and maybe you can tell me, or maybe you can share with me what you've agreed upon between yourselves, because you both have the information in front of you. So Gina, do you want to start with one of the things you've agreed upon?
so we agreed that Elise could have access to the shore house that belongs to my family. And, I think that would help for her and her connection with my family. So we did agree on that.
Okay. But did you agree that you were keeping the house, that from a
Yes.
title
Yeah.
point of view and ownership, you're going to keep the house?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
but
We just discussed, obviously,
Yeah.
she would have to let me know, and we'd have a schedule so that we don't have any crossover. And she's willing to also understand that it's my family's home. And so she needs to, treat it as such and not treat it as a vacation getaway with friends or things like that.
Is there a period of time that she's going to have access, or is it something you're going to negotiate? I'm just trying to understand, the devil being in the details.
Yeah.
Is this for 10 years? Is it for a lifetime? Is it for a year?
I think that we just discussed until such time that it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if this goes in a different way, then obviously she's not coming to the house because we're not talking at all and this imploded sort of. But otherwise, right now, I think we're leaving it open. I mean, it's not occupied all the time. It truly is just a shore house. She is aware, obviously, my family gets to choose their weekends first before she does. But I think at this point, if things go well, then it doesn't, she has been around my family for a long time. I trust her. I would guess at some point our lives may go in different ways, and it would become a non-issue.
Okay. So Gina, I'm going to give you a bit of homework to think about. It's just, under what circumstances would you see that situation not working for you? Whether Elise is in a new relationship, or, are there certain
we
guests?
have discussed that actually a
did
bit
talk about
about
Yeah.
moving forward, and even with our social circles, with our friends, wanting to be able to still go to the same birthday parties and things like that and be cordial with each other. And we've kind of are trying to agree on bringing a new partner into the situation, and when does that become inappropriate or hurtful. So, at this point, there is no one in the picture, obviously. So, but moving forward, I respectfully would not bring my partner to the shore house. That's something that is just for the family and just for friends, not for, we've agreed that I would not bring my lover there.
Okay, all right. It sounds like you've had a lot of offline conversations on this. And so when we
We're
write the
trying.
agreement up, you can give me the words that you want me to include in the memorandum of understanding.
Great.
So what else have you agreed upon? And maybe I'll say Elise this time. Maybe, is there another point you've agreed upon?
We've agreed upon the splitting of the house, we agree upon most things, to be honest with you. There's just, like you were saying, there are a lot of things we agree upon.
So you agreed to share the proceeds from the house equally? Is that what I understood?
Yes.
That's what you were talking about in your last session. I remember that came up. Okay. All right. Proceeds shared equally. Okay. And is anything else that you agreed upon?
I'm trying to remember our last session.
So,
Go ahead.
some of it was a little, preliminary. That we started talking about the dog.
I think we lost the volume. No, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So I think one of the things we started to talk about was Roscoe, the dog. And so we sort of got wrapped up in that a bit and we did agree that we would share the dog. It's just a matter of how, what plays into that, insurance bills and dog food, all those kinds of things. So I think we need just a little more guidance on that, and maybe that's something we talk about next time, but that is something that we agreed that we're not going to keep the dog from one another.
And we also agreed about my alimony payments. We've come to a number of, $2,500 a month that's going to be paid to me to help transition into my new life. That's, what I'm staying somewhere else, trying to find a new place to live. Yeah.
All right. So the areas you've agreed upon are access to that shore house, that you're sharing the proceeds from the residents, and that you're sharing Roscoe, and some details to be determined, and that you've agreed to an initial amount of alimony of $2,500 a month. We haven't, so where are the areas that you disagree?
I think the biggest point of contention with us is that if we were a straight couple and we were allowed to have been married whenever we wanted to, like everybody else, the law in Jersey is the years that you're married. That's the alimony that you were paid, correct? Right.
Yeah, length of marriage is a determinator of,
Yes.
one of the determinators of the length, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we talked about when we went through the statutory factors, right?
Right. So I think that's the biggest issue, is that Gina believes that our marriage did not start until 2013 when we were actually married on paper, where I believe that when we bought a house together, that to me was a commitment. That to me was, we are in this together. We are sharing our lives together, everything equally. And I believe that that's what it should be, split going forward. And she disagrees with that. So that's a little tough for sure.
Okay, so before I get to Gina, what you're saying is that you believe that the length of alimony should be, or the beginning of when should be the determinant. Is it when you bought the house, which was the same time you had your commitment ceremony? Is there some other date? I'm just trying to understand that.
Right. That to me, ideally, it would be that full length of time. I mean, this is not something to go back and forth about, are these years, so it's like, we've agreed, well, we can maybe do 9 years because that's one more than what we were actually married for. But to me, it's like, what is the difference then? It's like our relationship was worthless then, like it wasn't valued to you. Like that, it makes me feel less than, because that it's not being recognized as us being together. So to me, it would be 2008 when we moved into the house together.
So you're looking at that date of 2008. Do you want to talk about the same issue in terms of what your perspective is on the length?
Yeah, I'm not saying the relationship was not valid in 2008, but again, I feel that these are all transactions at some level that then affect everything else in your life. And as I have said in the past, if it was any other couple that bought a house together but didn't get married years later, they would not, whether they're straight or gay, they would start from their marriage date, right? And I think if our intention was that we were going to operate financially as a married couple, then I think we probably would have had an agreement in place. We would have discussed other things. But I do understand her point, but I think I also paid out a lot more money over the term of the relationship. I was able to provide a better lifestyle for Elise without asking for anything in return. And so I feel that I contributed that. And so now here we are, and we're having this discussion, and I'm also giving her access to my family shore house. At this point, it's unlimited. There's no reason, it's not being used. She can use it. I'm giving her half the proceeds of the house. When I put all the money out, I'm carrying most of the bills. I'm paying for the upkeep. I'm not taking those items away from her before she gets her share. I'm giving her share. And on top of that, I've agreed to $2,500 a month. So I don't see it as I'm taking away from the relationship. I see it as I always gave to the relationship, and I don't know. And I always gave as if, to her point, as if we were married, because I paid more and never asked for anything. So I have a hard time being told that I don't think the relationship is valid, and also that I should be responsible for all of that on top of everything else I've done.
Okay. So I think that what I'm hearing is that both of you have a different perspective on the date, that Lisa's looking at 2008 as a starting point. And Gina, if you were to look at this, or, if maybe you just want to address what you feel in terms of length of alimony is reasonable. Either way, whatever way you want to tackle that topic, in the end, that's what the question is, like, what is the length? And I'll talk a little bit about some options, but I'm interested first in where we're starting, and then we can lay out some options that you might not have thought about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I am, I would agree to the 9 years of the marriage, but I don't think that I need to agree to more than that.
Okay. So you're actually agreeing to the from what I understand is that you have a
It's only 8 years.
8 years marriage. So let me go back for the 8-year marriage. What length of alimony would you be open to in this conversation? What is your proposal?
I mean, I think this is what we've talked about a lot, and obviously Elise wants her statutory amount. So I would agree to the 8 years if we can just move past this part.
Okay. So, I think we talked about that you both went to your attorneys and they gave you some advice in this area. Maybe I could ask you that, what advice did your attorneys give you regarding this issue? I will tell you, as a mediator, this is usually the most difficult part of a divorce when you have same-sex couples and they didn't have access, is, the kind of, unless there's some type of written agreement, how you deal with the issue of, length. And so you're not alone in this conversation. My other clients have really said the same thing you've said, that I don't want to go to trial on this. I don't want a judge to intervene, and I want to make my own decisions. And so, we look at length, and, I talked about, it's up to you. The rule in New Jersey is usually, unless there's an exceptional circumstance in a traditional marriage, the length wouldn't exceed the length of the marriage, but it's really up to you what you both want to do. So what I'm hearing Gina say is she's actually willing to do the alimony for the full length of the marriage, the 8 years. And at least if your marriage had started in 2008 instead of 2013, what was the length you were looking at, or what advice did you get from your attorney regarding that?
So I definitely would like it from 2008 again, because I do believe that is when we committed to each other. However, my attorney has advised me that, maybe 10 years could be a good compromise in that. So it's not just like Gina's getting her way, like she usually does. So I think that 10 years would be not ideally what I want, but something I'd be willing to settle for. Also, stuff with Roscoe pending, because that's pretty important as well.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you're saying is that your attorney is saying, if the marriage had been 13 years, that 10 years would be a reasonable amount of alimony for you to expect. Is that right?
No, they're saying that if the marriage was 13 years, then I should get the full 13 years. But based off of the conversations I've had, our relationships, how we do want the outcome to be, I'm trying to compromise and be reasonable enough that I don't want this to end badly. I don't want this to go to court. So I'm trying, it should be 13 years. It should be from 2013 or 2008, but it, if I get 10 years, I think that's at least something that'll help me, go into my new life. It'll help.
So at this point, we're not very far apart, right? The proposals that you have on the table, the 10 versus the 8. So maybe we can talk about some options. First of all, I'm wondering if there is if either of you want to talk about the 10 versus the 8, and if there would be any movement. But sometimes people do. Some of my clients do a step down amount for the last. Sometimes when there's a disagreement about the length that accommodates both people, where they may agree to step down the amount of alimony for the term that there is a difference of opinion. Sometimes they do budgets and they try and figure out where they're going to be in 8 years versus 10 years. It's up to you how you want to approach this. What's the cost of the litigation would far outstrip, I would guess this, your attorneys both told you that to try this case would be somewhere in the range of 40,000 a piece, right? So and that's not what you want to do anyhow. So I don't know that you need to reach an agreement today, but I wanted to ask you how you want to approach this so that when we meet next time, maybe you do reach a settlement. I know that Elise said she really wanted to reach a settlement today, but I'm not trying to force that issue.
I mean, to me, I would have to go back and just, I'd have to think about it. I'd have to do the math. I'd have to, probably talk to my attorney again and see really what we would do. I unfortunately, I think viable options, and I'm certainly not saying I wouldn't consider them, but I do need to go back and see how that would play out for me financially, and just, given everything that's happened with, COVID and the pandemic, and the work that's been going on in my company. And, I got to the place where I was comfortable with the years of the marriage, and to consider, and I understand at least what Elise wants, but I had not thought about these options. So I feel I would be doing both the disservice to myself and to Elise if I just said yes or no to any one of these things. I really would want to go back and think about that and see the numbers.
And then I think then we should decide that we're going to have whatever it is, 2 weeks to figure it out. And then we have to come to an agreement by that point. There has to go one way or the other. We cannot keep going on this. It has to be, if it's not today, it has to be next week, or it has to be 2 weeks from now, I think.
Can I suggest this, that why don't we schedule to come back in 2 weeks? And if you still are not in agreement, I'm happy to do a 5-way meeting with the attorneys in the room. We can invite them in, because sometimes it's helpful to get legal advice right at your, as you're having this conversation. I understand, at least, that, sometimes the more time you have, the more it takes to come to an agreement, but I have no idea what's going to happen in the 2 weeks. And, I think that sometimes you let this become an organic, process, and we'll see what happens in our next session. So, but always to know that you can bring the attorneys in the room, we can bring the attorneys in 2 weeks, but I think that we might want to hold off and see where your proposals are at that point.
That makes sense.
Okay, so why don't we schedule that? And I think the homework is to review. I will send a summary of the session to both of you, and to review it with your attorneys and see the advice they can get, and ask them, a question that if they were representing, your partner instead of you, what advice they would be giving to kind of test the best case, worst case, and most likely scenario.
Great.
Okay. And again, I hope everything goes well with your house closing. It's really an exciting time. I think prices are very favorable to these sellers, so you're in good shape there.
Sure.
Okay, thank you again.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Oop, where am I? For some reason, my video is not on.
We can see you.
Oh, you can see me. Fine. That's excellent. Okay. Elise and Gina, I think you did really, really well. You were very believable. And congratulations, Elise, on getting $2,500 a month. It sounds great. Wonderful. So let me ask you a few questions. Have you ever seen a mediation before today?
No. Gina,
Online.
probably.
Yes, I mean, some online, many years ago, I did see one in person, but not on this topic. So it's interesting.
Is this what you expected it would be like?
I think for me it was. I mean, I don't have a previous history, so it kind of seemed like it was, yeah. What
Okay.
it was expected for me, yes. Jeannie.
And how was the experience? Just as an experience.
I thought the experience was great. I mean, I think having such a casual tone while talking about something that is so important is really helpful. It really takes the edge off of what could be a completely just contentious, terrible thing, which I don't think, I mean, you think about it and it exists, but I don't think I fully appreciated sort of Anju's kind of calm, just sort of talking through things feeling instead of pulling it. Like it was just less effort, I think, than I expected.
Okay. You have the same feeling, Elise?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it felt very natural.
If I described it as sort of like having a conversation among the three of you, would that be
Right.
accurate?
Yeah.
Very accurate. Mhm.
Okay. And Gina, you're a lawyer. So is this the kind of conversation you often have with lawyers?
It is not. I'm more on the transactional side. And it's even then it's usually a little more heated than this, particularly when people disagree. I mean, I've represented husbands and wives selling property.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of the attorneys become sort of they're talking heads, and then automatically your instinct is sort of like mama bear protecting your client, and it has to be aggressive or it doesn't mean anything. So this was a nice change.
Okay. How was the pacing of this? I mean, there was first you did an agenda, and then you talked about or Anju talked about your objectives and things you agreed on, and eventually you got to the disagreement. Was that pacing okay with you, or did you get impatient about getting to the point?
No, I think the pacing for me was good because it kind of level set what we were doing.
Mhm.
So I was able to sort of get my thoughts together and know where I was headed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been very easy to just be really aggressive, I think, up front, based off of, this conversation was something that we both are very passionate about. I think that taking time to go through the steps of it, each little piece of it, I think, like Gina said, it helps really get your thoughts together and be able to kind of not just vomit your emotions out, to actually be
Right.
able to be a little more, succinct with it. I enjoyed the pacing of it for me.
Okay. Sometimes when you would say something, Elise, or you, Gina, Anju would then restate it.
Mhm.
Did you find that helpful or not?
I find it helpful because I think that it doesn't allow any kind of miscommunication. It's very much, you said this is how it's going to be. There's no perception can get really, really interesting what people choose to hear. So I think that's very helpful in a mediation type of situation to really have it laid out. Okay, so you're saying this, we're both agreed, great. Move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I think for me, and I know that I do this in just my life with people, when you disagree with someone, sometimes you don't actually hear them. You just assume what their answer is because you're like, yeah, I know what you're going to say. So to have it repeated by a third party makes you focus and pay attention to what they actually said versus what you perceived would be their normal reaction and what they were going to say.
Okay. Now I want you to be constructively critical. Was there anything that Anju did that bothered you, or anything of that type that you wish she had done something different?
I think for me, the only thing was the question about what we had agreed on.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if the reaction would be different if it was, here's the things you agreed on last time, and just sort of done with it, and then move on to where are you on the things you don't agree on. Because I felt like it opened the door a little bit to think about, do I want to change my mind on what we agreed on because we haven't written it down anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. Elise, anything?
You know.
No, I don't really feel like I have a strong enough history in mediation to give constructive criticism.
I'm just asking for your feelings, as the client, as a client here. Was there anything that you reacted to? You say, gee.
Yeah, I mean, no, it was, to me, it was pretty straightforward. I do see where Gina is coming from as far as, giving any kind of leeway to change your mind after things are set up, because I do like so much the being, okay, this is what it is laid out. So yeah, I think if we previously had written it down, if we previously had in our previous session done it, I would have preferred to just have gone through the bullet points of it and then find out what the new issues might be.
Okay. At one point, Gina, you have been talking for a fairly long time about something. I forget now what it was. And Elise, you were about to say something, and Anju started talking. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay.
There's good and bad things. I mean, I feel like just because who I am always gonna want to come back and say something. So I think I would have liked to have said my piece, but also it was nice it could have been a little bit more emotional than it needed to. So I think that actually was not necessarily a bad thing. I definitely would have, in that moment, perhaps if it was noticed that I was trying to say something, there could have been a follow-up. Oh, did you have something to say about this? But otherwise, I feel like I would have just yelled it out anyway. But yeah, there could have been a moment there to get, how do you feel about that in that time?
I, on the other hand, appreciate that she was cut off. So
just so you know, Carl, I will say this, that every time I asked a question, Elise spoke first. And so I was actually trying to change the dynamic a little bit and in going to Gina. I don't know if you noticed that, but in almost every conversation or question, I didn't say someone should go first, but Elise went first. So
makes sense. So
okay.
is how it goes.
Okay. Now, would you like to say anything else before I go to Anju?
no.
would you hire me as your mediator?
Oh, no, okay. I have another question. I forgot this. A couple other questions. If you were married and you were getting divorced, do you think that you would try to find a gay mediator, or would it be not important to you if you had, someone else say, this is really a good mediator, you ought to go to this person, but it's not gay? Would you have a preference, do you think?
I think so.
Okay, and why?
I think because I hadn't thought about it until we did this, really, but that question of 2008 versus 2013, I think there was a part of that, and maybe gay mediator is not the right word, but someone who has experience with gay divorces, because of that emotional piece that's attached to what isn't legally a marriage, that I think, like, kind of like I said before, a lot of heterosexual couples get married. They don't talk about, well, when we dated when we were 18 through 26, you now owe me because we're getting divorced. So I do think but I do think there has to be some sort of emotional recognition of the difference of not having had the opportunity to have it be legal back then. So someone with it, they don't have to be gay. I think they just need to have the experience in it.
Okay. So, okay, now let me turn to you, Anju, because you've mediated a fair number of gay divorces, right?
I have. And this is always the issue, right? The issue of, when do we start tolling the marriage, so to speak? And every case is different because there are a different set of facts. Was there an economic dependence? What did the people say in their commitment ceremony as far as, what they were doing? Even if, when they bought the house together, did they title it as joint tenants with rights of survivorship versus joint tenants in common? Any of these issues could be a factor, but every case is different. And so sometimes you have to dig into those. No, I'm not gay. I have, my brother is gay. I have a lot of gay friends. It's not really an issue for me, but I'm not gay. And so sometimes it's like not being Black. It's a statement of fact. You can't change that. It's up to the clients. So the clients who've chosen me, obviously that's not an issue. But again, it's not the majority of my practice, right? It's whereas there are people who the primary focus of their practice has become the gay and lesbian community.
So, okay, so let's talk a minute about what you were trying to achieve in the mediation, and especially in the earlier parts of it before they got to the issues.
So I think my goal was, first of all, to kind of create that objectives. If you want to have a friendly divorce or you want to be in have a relationship, then going into litigation or taking an extreme view, what's most important to you? Is it winning in the numbers, or is it winning in terms of being able to maintain relationships? And how do you balance that? I also talked about areas of agreement because I wanted them to state where they had agreed, because sometimes, and I think most clients do focus on this, that they focus on where they disagree, but they really mostly agree on 2/3 of the issues. And it's good for them to acknowledge it. I think a lot of times I would have summarized it too, rather than have them say it, but I wanted them to do more talking than me in this video.
Yeah. I was getting a little concerned that you were going to run through all your time talking about things that were agreed to before we're getting to the meat. So we've got to have a real nice disagreement.
There were only 3 bullet points for, that, in areas of agreement. So I already had those. It wasn't,
okay. So
you just didn't read all my role plays, the role play scenario.
No, I didn't read any of it. So okay, you had this all scheduled in your mind as to how much time to play with all of it.
Well, I mean, I have the agenda, so yeah, I'm going through it, and I've kind of timed it.
Okay, Anju, that I find restating at times annoying, but I'm really pleased to hear that Elise and Gina found it valuable, right? And so that's something I have to keep in mind. Well, I don't have to keep it in mind because I'm retired. So, but I would have kept that in mind if I were still practicing. So anything else you'd like to say, Anju?
Oh, I think that Gina and Elise actually did a really good job in the role play, in that they didn't overact, because sometimes when we do role plays, it's like we give out Academy Awards for extreme behavior. And look, everyone's been in relationships, and we know how painful they are at the end, even if it hadn't been a marriage. So I don't think it's hard in some ways to think about, at the end, whatever, the end is, the, dividing of the stuff, the pain of it, the idea that moving out, even though you're looking forward to the sale, can also be a really stress point for them. But my goal was to actually show all the good things that were happening before we brought up the stuff where they disagreed.
Right. Well, I think one of the biggest successes here is that Elise and Gina felt that the atmosphere was really conducive, and sort of this conversational added feel to it all, which I think is really relaxing. And that's what I think a good mediator can do, is make you feel like you're having a conversation, and it's going to be much easier to resolve it and stay out of an adversarial sort of positioning. So Anju, you're really good at that. And I think that's really important for all mediators to do that kind of thing. So, okay. You'd like to say anything else, Anju?
Yeah, I think that when I look at clients, I think of them as colleagues. I'm not above them. I'm not below them. When I'm in my office, we sit at a round table. All the chairs are the equal distance, equal size. I'm not sitting in a bigger chair than the clients or smaller chair. So that's how I view my clients. I'm a consultant to them. They're colleagues. I hope they felt that way, that I wasn't trying to be the mom in the room or the boss in the room. So that's really, I guess, a overriding principle that I have in my mediations.
Okay, we have one question, and then I'm going to go to Jody, who raised her hand. Questions from Bob McDonald. Anju, as the mediator, did Anju, as the mediator, already review the alimony statutory factors prior to this session? If not, would these factors be discussed with the parties?
Interestingly, I have them printed out, and I might have gone to them had we needed to, but I think I almost do that as a defensive measure. They've both consulted with attorneys. They've gotten that information. So yeah, it depends on the situation, but I have them at my fingertips. Sometimes I'll review them in advance. Sometimes I won't. I don't say always or never in this, sometimes.
Okay. Something I forgot to mention, Anju, that you did that I'm sure drove some people nuts, but I personally like, is that you asked them, what did your attorneys say? I think that's perfectly appropriate for a mediator to ask. Gina and Elise, you had no hesitancy telling them, right? And Gina, you're an attorney. Even with that background, did you have any problem with Anju asking that?
No, because part of that made me feel like, particularly for Elise, if I put that out there and she can see that my attorney is going to back me, and I can see that hers is going to back her. So we already know if this goes to another level, it's a given. We're going to spend more money than this whole thing is worth.
I was a little hesitant, honestly, though, because I did not want to reveal my hand like that to Gina. I think that was a private thing between my lawyer and I think that gave her more leverage. I mean, I could have lied about it, I guess, but I think it gave her more leverage to know that my attorney is trying to tell me I need to compromise more, when that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear, no, I want all of it.
So why didn't you just say, no, I don't want to tell you?
Because I don't know how it works, Carl. I'm just, is that allowed? I don't do these things. I don't get divorces.
Okay. So Jill Horowitz has a question. Jill, unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first I want to tell everybody you did an amazing job. I thought this was real for a few minutes. Like, I forgot that this was a mock. So anyway, I thought it was great. And also, Andrew, I really liked your question, which I've never thought of asking, is if you saw yourself in 10 years, how would you like to look back and remember this, your divorce or whatever, which put them in a really different mindset. I really like that question. I'm paraphrasing, you said it a lot better, but something like that, like what would you, anyway, but my question really, Andrew, is when Elise said that I guess it was 13-year marriage, that she could have gotten the whole thing as a alimony. And Gina also said, her the marriage is 8 years and she was willing to give the entire length of the marriage. You never said anything, and maybe it's not proper to say anything, that's not usual, right? To give the entire length of the marriage as alimony. And so I don't know. I
might have-
would have had a hard time with that. I'm not very experienced with mediation.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I might have asked you, I might have asked, was there a range they talked about? I mean, the fact is, we all know that it's unusual to get the full length of the marriage as in terms of length of alimony, but I wasn't going to argue with them because I'm really just I want them to come to some type of, it's a year, right? Either it's 9 years, either it's 10 years with a step down, or either it's 10 years without a step down. I kind of threw that step down in as a kind of, well, that's an option that some of my clients have used. But it's up to them in the end, right? They have to come to a number.
Well, but let's say at a lower level, let's say it was 8 years. Let's say somehow we couldn't go, we went with a real marriage at 2013. And let's say her attorney said, no, you really are only obligated to half of 8 years. So it could have gone way down to 4 years. I mean, so you never, and I'm not criticizing, I just trying to, because I don't know how to deal with this. Like when Elise said that it was, oh, she's entitled to 13 years. I mean, I think that's like basically false. I mean, is anyone gonna give an entire?
Well, I mean, that would have fallen apart the minute I got the attorneys in the room together. And so that was an option I gave them. So, hey, they don't have to reach an agreement today. They just have to keep going. And
well, I agree. I guess I just don't know how to handle, so I have one mediation now, my very first one. And obviously alimony is a huge point of contention. It's because it's more fluid. It's like the one thing that and so I felt like, and I did explain to them how I thought it arranged, and maybe I did the wrong thing. Maybe I shouldn't have done that.
Jill, are you what's your background? Are you an attorney?
I am an attorney.
I would have guessed that from her logo.
Did I
didn't
say? Oh, okay. Well, I don't even know what's up there. But anyhow, yes, I'm an attorney. I'm learning mediation. I took a long course, and I have one mediation clients, and I'm working with them now. And it's, we're working through this, and the alimony is a big issue because the wife makes more money.
Right.
So it's just like, it's also, she really, it's just been tough for me because I'm used to it's easier on some level, believe it or not, to be on one side.
Okay, Jill, I'm going to tell you what I usually hear from clients.
Okay.
I usually hear the payor attorney will tell them it's half the length of the marriage, and the person who's receiving alimony is coming in with something with 2/3 to 3/4. And that's what I asked them to ask their attorney if they were representing their partner instead of them, what advice would they have given? Because really that sets a range. But that's what I usually hear, but I'm letting them work it out. And, hey, am I going to, they've got attorneys who are going to eventually sign off on the, with the property settlement agreement. So that I want them to come in with proposals. At this point, 8 and 10 years is not that far off, right? They're going to settle this because they want to.
Okay.
Yeah. And as a mediator, I wouldn't be telling them what they ought to be settling for, or if it's half of the marriage or not. First of all, it varies widely over the state and by different practitioners, et cetera. So there's a wide variability. Plus, the parties were pretty close between themselves. And how many years apart were they on the alimony?
8 versus 10. Don't, come on. That's the reality is this is going to settle.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
And how much was the alimony per year?
$2,500 a month. So what's that?
$30,000. So for $60,000 is the total difference between. Well, you couldn't litigate it for that anyway. So anyway.
Right. So, yeah. So, sometimes when people come in, you there's a part of you that is kicking in to say, that's not what usually happens. So you have to bite your tongue on that because you're there as the mediator to facilitate this. You don't need to get into that conversation.
Gotcha.
Right.
So when Elise said, her attorney told her that she's entitled to all 13 years, you wouldn't have said that's
because she footnoted that. She footnoted that, but her attorney told her that 10 would be reasonable based on whatever she thought about. So,
I see. Okay.
and that was, You know, I mean, you're not very far off. They're going to reach some type of settlement, right? They're not going to litigate that. They already said that, you know,
Right,
they agreed that for that amount of difference, they would not be litigating this.
right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. So thank you very much. This was really good. I'm glad, Gina and Elise, you enjoyed it. You did wonderfully. And I think it was a very a good experience today for everybody. Thank you, Anju.
Thank you, Gina and Lisa. I really hope that I can help you to the finish line.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Us
thank you,
too.
Carl. Thank you. Thank you very
And-
much, Andrew.
And keep mediation in mind if you guys get married and get
Okay.
together.
You got
One of
it.
these days, Gina.
Okay. Take care. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay,
Oh, by
you
the way,
too.
today
Bye.
is
Thank
the
you.
today is the last webinar until September. So I will be sending out a complete list of all the webinars done since the beginning of time on NJAPM. And
I
Yeah.
want to say that, remember, we have our annual civil and divorce seminar on June 4th. You can register online. It's very reasonably priced. And we have two specific divorce workshops, one on high conflict divorce and another on 50-50 parenting plans and child support. So those are two very hot topics that I think people will enjoy, in addition to a whole webinar on pivoting to return to work in person.
okay.
Thank you again.
You.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.